so ready for.
This week was uncomfortably cold.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was so cold. I was like, oof. So, oh my. I'm so excited for spring, our spring event. Oh my gosh, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
So,
and the fabrics fruit are so cute.
Exactly.
I really new ones that came in. Not that Morning Blooms wasn't pretty, but
that new collection that I did see, that's the one.
I
was like,
really
that is
cute.
so pretty. So.
Okay.
Are we live?
Oh,
we are live.
There we are.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that
too.
summer weather.
Yes.
It's going to be so great. So, hi, I see everybody joining in. So, it's going to be, what's today's weather?
Today,
45?
Something like that. I saw it's supposed to get up to like 60 maybe.
Up to 60?
So
oh,
I'm happy with
so
that.
excited. I'm not a big fan of winter.
Yeah, no.
So, I mean, winter clothes, yes. Winter itself, absolutely not.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning. How's everyone doing today? So,
hello.
Yeah, so we are just so excited. So, welcome to Gloria Horn Sewing Studio. Today is our first ever Fashion Friday class with me, John, and
Genevieve.
So, today we are going to show you how to make this beautiful little patchwork dress that we have behind us. And that Genevieve is also wearing. She made this one out of upcycled shirts.
I did.
So, really cool. Before we get into it, I do want to take 1 second just to talk about our spring event. You are definitely going to want to sign up. So if you are new here, we are Gloria Horn Sewing Studio. We're located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And we have an upcoming event this spring, and you are definitely going to want to sign up. The spots are selling out very quickly, and you will get to meet me, Genevieve, Gloria, Kate, Steve, almost everybody. So we have a lot of fun projects planned. We're going to be selling with all different types of machines. It's really fun, and I definitely recommend signing up. So
yes, the fabrics for it just came in like last week, and they're really, really cute, really pretty, like fun, springy, floral, and summery. Like it's really, really.
Oh
really
my
great.
gosh! And the projects,
they're going to be so exciting.
With what Tommy and I have planned, we're going to be using the Brother Scan and Cut machines, and we get to do something with rhinestones.
Ooh!
And we plan on eventually doing something with our classes here with rhinestones. So
that will be so much fun.
I can't reveal everything. It's supposed to be a little bit of a secret, but I'm showing it a little bit, talking about it. So it's a sneak peek, a teaser. So, but yeah, so do we want to get started? So
let's get started. Yeah.
Today we are going to be showing Simplicity 9615. It's this beautiful A-line shift dress. And we made a couple kits for it too. We're going to show those in a little bit. But it's a really fun dress. And as we can see, Genevieve is wearing it.
Yes.
So it comes with a couple different size options for the pattern too. It's extra small through extra large. I will say that this dress is very much forgiving. There's a lot of extra ease added into the pattern. And so originally we were going to go through all the measurements today. But I think the important measurement is really just the bust measurement, since it flares out very much so from the bust. So, yes.
Yeah. So, quick measurement demo. I'm going to do it on John right now. So what we're looking for is the bust measurement, which is different if, you wear a bra. It's different than your bra size. So I'm going to go right around John's chest. I'm going to reach under his arms for my tape measure. Oops. I do that all the time. I've taken so many measurements. You'd think I'd be better at it by now.
And when you're doing the measurements for the bust measurement, you want to go through the apex. So you might want to wear something that's a little bit more tighter fitting. And you might want to do this not wearing a very padded bra if you're going to take this measurement. And it does help to have a friend that's taking that measurement.
So you're looking for the widest part of the chest, 37 inches. That would be. We go to our dress pattern for bust. Go over till usually it gives a range of sizes. So wherever you fall, that's where you're going to want to base your pattern size on.
So if I was going to wear one of these, I might be a medium based off my chest measurement. So I wouldn't worry too much about the waist measurement or back to neck to waist for this specific dress after we tested it out. And Genevieve and Kate tried it on, and we were just like, there's a lot of extra ease in the pattern, which quick explanation. So Genevieve and I, We both sew clothes. We both designers. Genevieve designs costumes. I design clothing. We both made our own patterns. So ease is the amount of extra from the body. So with this dress, if there is 6 inches of ease, it means that it's fitting 6 inches away from that body, sort of. And then obviously it folds in, but that's kind of how we describe it a little bit. So yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah, just as a reference, I'm wearing a medium right now. That's where my measurements fell into pretty on this dot. I also referenced my waist and hip, but again, you really don't have to with this dress. There is a lot of extra room, so I could honestly probably fit into a size small, but I don't mind this nice flowy moment we've got going on.
It is
here.
a very fun flowy dress.
Yes.
And Genevieve, can we show the back of your dress
Yes,
real quick?
absolutely.
So
Turn
Genevieve
around.
made this with a shirt, and look, she did the placket from the shirt on the back, and I just love that. So she upcycled this one, and you could totally upcycle it. If you're gonna go buy a couple shirts from the thrift store, try to find the largest shirt that you can.
Yes.
Get the most fabric out of it. So
Yes. I did make this out of 3 shirts. One was a triple XL, one was a regular XL, and one I think was actually a women's shirt that was in the men's section, but that happens. Yeah, I try to look for the biggest sizes. Sometimes you'll get into a position where you find a really cute fabric that you like, but it's maybe not the right size.
it's like a
And-
extra small, and you can't get.
Yeah, and you just can't get a lot out of it. Yeah, maybe I'll talk about some more upcycling techniques that I use personally later once we get into things, but I saw someone ask, it does have pockets.
Yes.
So, and it
Who-
comes with the pattern.
Who wouldn't want a dress without
Yes.
pockets? I mean, unless you have
It's
a
a
cute
necess-
bag, but
Right.
you still want pockets.
It's a must-have these days, and I was going to tell you how to do them if it didn't come in the pattern, but it does, so we don't have to do that today. But
So we're going to go into a couple products first real quick. So I'm going to give a little bit of a brief outline. Let's go ahead and just pull out the instructions
Yeah,
real
of course.
because I wanted to talk about the pattern pieces. And we're going to want you guys, if you're going to do this project, probably screenshot, because Genevieve and I, we want to make this as simple as possible for you
Yes.
guys. We're not going to go over every single step and sew it. We did a couple of the piecing steps together, but we're still going to show putting together the front, the back, the hard parts. But a brief overview of the pattern real quick. So if Kate could just zoom in. So we could see right here, here's all your pattern pieces, and it lists all of them right there. So it'll explain the facings, the front left, the front back. And then if we look over here, it's going to tell us how to cut out the fabric, laying it on 45 degree or 45-inch fabrics. So definitely follow these cutting instructions. For our kits that we're going to show in a second, we cut them out to the exact measurements for the fabric that you need. Just make sure that you're laying them out this way. That way you don't actually accidentally cut a little too much when you needed to cut a little less of something.
And if I can point out, this has our fabric laying in a single layer, so you're going to want to unfold your fabric once you get it. Some patterns will have you cut when it's folded because the pieces will be mirrored. This one has separate pattern pieces for the front and the back sides of it. So you're going to want to lay your fabric flat, so you're just cutting one. You don't want doubles. I mean, I guess unless you want to make a matching dress for someone, and then you can cut doubles. But
Yes, and I will say, it might look a little confusing at first because there's a lot of pieces, but it goes together really fast. So I will say on the one I cut back there, I cut 2 on a fold, and I was like, oh, I was supposed to cut one of this. So just keep that in mind. We're going to shift over a little bit over to this section too, and we're going to talk about seam finishes real quick. So we're going to show this part right over here. And we're going to go over that. So there's a couple different ways that you could finish seams. For this pattern, it is a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Most of Simplicity's patterns are going to be 5/8 inch seam allowance. And then there's a couple different ways that you could finish it. And we're going to go over that in a little bit. But what we're going to be doing is using a serger. We're also going to quickly demo one of the stitches that is on the Jubilant behind us, which we're going to be sewing on today, on how if you don't have a serger, you could finish those seams. It does take a little bit longer, but you know, it's still something that you could do if you don't have a serger. So that way we don't have the inside of our dress fraying, because rule of thumb for all clothing, the inside should be just as beautiful as the outside. So, and then there is a couple other techniques that it does explain on the pattern, such as notching and doing understitching. We're going to cover over that. Now, it does mention stay stitching here. I personally don't do that. I don't know if Genevieve did with hers.
I did with this just because I wanted to follow the pattern so I could, help everybody else work through it. In hindsight, it's probably not totally necessary. I think you could get away with not doing it. But if it's something new to you and you want to try it, absolutely go ahead and do it.
Exactly. So, and if you are going to do that stay stitching, maybe just do it at a 1/2 inch rather than 5/8 because you don't want to have to go through and pick out those stitches. That's why I typically avoid it. It's something that's used for very slippery fabrics too, sometimes to keep them to have their shape. But with this quilter's cotton, I would say that it holds its shape very well.
Absolutely.
So you could probably skip that step for some of those pieces. Now, do we want to begin with the first piece?
Yeah, let's start. I'm going to say, because there are so many pattern pieces in this pattern, what I did on this one here is I went through this list of all the pattern pieces. And then as I was working through the pattern, I came over here and I physically wrote in the numbers. Because in the pattern instructions, it doesn't reference the numbers. It references the name of the piece, which I don't think is super helpful. So I wrote in the numbers just so that I was making sure that I was using the right pieces.
Exactly.
It's very important in this piece. Because
it was very helpful because Genevieve sewed the first one, and then I was sewing one the other night when I got home, and I was like, I'm happy she wrote those in because it just made it so much faster for me. And so we're going to just show that. And if you want to turn your phone sideways, would you say, Kate, and screenshot it if you think that's best? Because we're going to show the back too, and just Genevieve wrote all those pattern piece numbers in. So if you want to just screenshot from this area right here real quick for the front, if we could zoom in. And I'll give you guys a second, and then we'll just show the back. And then just this half right here. This just makes it a lot easier when you're going through it, especially because it's a lot of different pieces, lots of different fabric. And I will say, Genevieve doing that was such a time saver for me. So hopefully we could save you some time too.
And our patterns are on the way. We're still waiting for them to come in, but we're going to get them to you as soon as we can. And this video will be around for whenever you need it.
Exactly.
I saw we had a question. Marianne asked what kind of fabrics work for this pattern. And another really cool feature of Simplicity Patterns is they have a section on here that recommends what fabrics to use. So on here we see it says cotton types, linen types, and it goes through all different sorts of fabric. The ones that we're doing today and the ones that we have in kits are just cotton fabrics from here in the store. So,
exactly. And you know what? I just saw like chambray and stuff. So we are looking at carrying some other fabrics soon. So it's still kind of in the works, but give us some time and we'll have some more options for future patterns we have coming out. And we did have to finalize a couple of things with them, but our patterns I think are going to be in next week. So I think I did get the shipment notification. So those are going to be sending out probably next week. But also, did we just want to take 1 second and go over the kits that we made for the dress before we start sewing? Because I wanted to give you guys some creative options here since we're already on the subject of fabrics.
So the one that we'll be demoing today, I'm just going to show you the pieces since we have it already cut out, is we're calling Blue Haze.
So pretty. I love these fabrics.
This is from our Blue Harmony collection, so you may recognize it.
I know, it's so pretty. So we have that kit down there. It just includes the fabrics. With this pattern, you do need a little bit of shape flex. We're going to have that after we go through a few kits, and we're just going to put that in the lineup. But I really like this collection right here. I think blue might be the prettiest.
It's really pretty. It was hard to pick kits because I'm really drawn to blues, and there's so many great blue fabrics in right now. Okay, I'm going to go back in order, Kate. I'm so sorry. All right, next we have our Daisy Day dress. This is the one that John did his sample with.
Yes, so I have like a half-finished sample behind us, and when I saw this, I was just like, you know what? It gives a little sundress in Italy moment. Maybe wear a sun hat, maybe put a little belt around it. So,
yes, I love the daisies. This is from the All About Daisies collection. And then we have Purple Posies. This might be my favorite, I think, of the kits we're doing.
Oh, look how pretty that is.
It's really, really gorgeous.
I feel like this is a pretty spring dress.
Yes. Spring, summer. Oh, I love this purple with the little tiny flowers. Super subtle. And then We have 4 for you today, so this is our last one. We have in our Lavender Lemonade collection.
I think Lavender Lemonade is one of my favorite 2 collections.
It's so bright and summery. So some nice purples and yellows.
I could totally see somebody wearing this dress, a nice sun hat,
Oh my
maybe
God, yes.
having a little drink of like limoncello. It's just such a pretty little fun
Gorgeous.
spring summer dress. So
Oh, so great. Oh, that's a great point. Show us where each color goes. So the way that we have these set up is these bigger sort of focal prints are going to be the biggest piece, which they call the main fabric in the kit. And then the other 2 are going to be accent pieces. They're a little different in measurement, so we'll have a little distinction in the kit as to which is which. And these are all cottons. Yeah, really
yes,
great.
So these are all quilter cottons. And they're really pretty. I love these collections, especially. I just can't get over this one again because this is
I
like,
love the lemons. It's so gorgeous.
I know. So I'm like, oh, we should have made maybe another dress already in this to show them that. But we're doing the Blue Haze one today.
Yes.
And I really do love this collection too. So
It's so pretty. Okay. Get our collections back over here. If you're picking your own fabric for this, I would recommend going with a sort of small, medium, large, sort of like how we put together our 3-yard quilt kits, like small, medium, large print, light, dark, somewhere in the middle. That's kind of what I did based for mine, and I really like the way it turns out. So,
and there is one more thing I'm going to go over real quick before we start. I know, sorry, I'm like, I see one more thing and I'm like, oh, I got to mention this real quick. So I have a couple new tools here. Well, one of them's new. I know we've shown this one before. So on your pattern pieces, you're going to have these little markings, these little dots, if we're able to zoom in. And this is where some of these tools really do come in handy because these are markings where you're going to line up. I can tell you for this piece, this is your front. You line up this dot with the front of the dress, and we'll show you that in a minute. But to cut these out perfectly, if you use the Perfect Punch tool, and we could just see, it will just easily make a little hole rather than trying to like use scissors and try to finagle out a little hole and end up ripping the tissue, which you don't want to do. You could go ahead and do that, and then you could use one of these friction heat erase pens, which we will probably be using these a lot with our projects. I like to use these for markings because they'll erase off with a little bit of steam and iron. You'll just use that, you'll mark through there. And then on the side here, this is a new tool. So this is a pattern notcher, and we use these a lot with pattern making, but I also like to use these with our patterns that we get in here because there's 2 ways that you can cut out your notches. And I use the pattern notcher here. You could cut them outwards, which I am not the biggest fan of doing, or you could use a pattern notcher and just snip. It does a small little snip perfectly. And I did bring a piece of paper just because I knew it was going to be a little hard to see with the tissue. And sometimes I like to transfer my patterns and I'll tape them onto a piece of 1x1 gridded pattern paper. But we could just see real quick that it makes a little snip like that, which you can then use to mark, or if you're like me, I will sometimes use my scissors and make a small, little bit less than 1/4 of an inch snip to line up my notches, because you use that to line up your pattern pieces perfectly when sewing. That's very important that you line up those notches. Otherwise, you might have a piece that's like, that's not fitting as it should be. So it is very helpful to have these tools because I just like to do that so I could use this to mark them a little bit easier.
Yeah, great. And one last thing about our kits that we have today, there is enough fabric in all of the kits for all of the sizes. So we cut it to the biggest size that you're going to need. So if you're making a smaller size, you'll have some extra fabric. And if you're making it for the largest size, you'll have just enough.
Perfect. So Genevieve is very much on top upstairs with kits. She does an amazing job. So
thank you.
okay, so now we're actually going to start sewing a little bit. So thank you for bearing with us a little bit, but we wanted to go over all the important stuff first because I didn't want to just jump straight into sewing. So, and I'm going to pull out those instructions real quick. So here we have the front. And now we did go ahead and do these 3 pieces off of camera because we just figured that it'd be a little easier to show you this way because we do have Gloria coming up after us at 3 o'clock. So we didn't want to take up too much time to give Kate some time in between to get set up. But what we did, and if you have done piecing before or quilting, any type, we just lined up these 2 pieces first as the instructions. You sew right sides together at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then what we did is we serged the raw edge, which we're going to show in a little bit with another piece. But you do want to have a nice clean finish on the edges, on the inside. So that's just what we did. And then we connected it, which I'm going to show for the serger on how I was doing it. So because it is 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, I like to cut off just a little bit with the serger, not too much. And I kind of like to leave it around 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch. So, but we just pieced those 3 pieces together like so. And I'm just going to show the serger real quick. So behind me, I have the Celebrate serger because I'm going to serge this part before we show the front. So behind me right here, I have the Celebrate Baby Lock serger, and it's a really, really nice one. It has jet air threading, so for the bottom loopers, which makes using a serger amazing. I have one at home still, and I think I need to upgrade soon because mine, I have to use a pair of tweezers and try to hook it around a part that goes back here. With this one, it just has that jet air threading. You push a button, and it will just pump right through. So really nice. If you are interested in one of these and want more information, please feel free to give us a call. And so I am sewing on a little bit of an angle here so that Kate can see, but I went ahead and put gray thread in just on this serger, just so that we could see it a little bit better than white thread. But I'm just going to have it go through, and I'm kind of lining up my fabric with the edge here. And I'm just going to let it clean, finish, and cut. Now you don't want to have your stitching line be over here. You don't want to go past your seam allowance when you're serging. This is just to finish that raw edge. So now I will say, if you have the Triumph or one of those 8-spool sergers, you could actually set it up so that you could sew, I believe, a chain stitch and cut and serge at the same time. So you could do your pieces and save a little bit of time, which would actually be kind of cool. So, but that is just how I'm serging that. I'm just trimming off a little bit and letting it finish off that raw edge. And when using a serger, you always want to leave a tail. Don't trim it right there. Make a tail, and then on here, on the Celebrate, there is a cutter, so you could just cut it rather than using a pair of snips. But always, always, always leave a little bit of a tail when you're serging. And I'm going to come back over here real quick to the ironing board. So we're going to show this in the lineup real quick, and you're going to want to get one of these because we will be using these sleeve ironing boards a lot. We're going to still use our wool ironing mats, but I do like to use the sleeve ironing boards because it makes it a little bit easier when pressing seams open. And I did want to talk about that before I showed that. There's 2 ways that you could finish this dress. So if you weren't going to serge it, you could finish off the edges with one of those stitches or serge both ends and press the seam open, which that's what I actually really like to use the ironing board for, is if I'm pressing it open.
Yes.
But if I'm doing it flat, I don't mind doing it on the wool mat. But when we're pressing these seams, after I serged it, for this, I'm just pressing it to the one side. So we'll use a little bit of steam. And then a little tailoring technique that I like to use. So this is a tailor's clapper from Gypsy Quilter at 7 inches. This will give you a little bit more of a professional press. So we're just steaming, and then we're pressing down. And it makes it really nice, makes it a little bit more professional. and makes it
Mhm.
really crisp too. And I love that. It's like we want to show you how to make clothes that you think that you're going to see in the store. So I want to show all my little tips and tricks too that I know.
Yes. Now, the pattern is going to tell you to press your seams open. You really don't have to. I think it works either way. I think they recommend open because it reduces a little bit of bulk, but you're really not going to notice that
Yeah,
much either
and-
way that you choose to do it.
So we're rebels here. Sometimes we do things a little bit differently. And I want to let you know that you don't always have to follow the patterns to the exact T.
Yes.
I did see somebody that say, could you turn this into a blouse? And you definitely
Yeah.
could. You could even add a little elastic waistband on the middle of it and cinch it.
Yeah.
We're not going to show that today, but just know you have flexibility with these patterns. You don't always have to follow them to the exact T. I find that serging it is just as easy and pressing it to one side. So I pressed the seam allowance down on this part, and then I pressed it to this side for the long ways. And then Genevieve, she top stitched hers.
Yes, I did end up top stitching mine. It doesn't call for it, but I think it gives it a really nice little extra finish. And because I pressed my seams open, it helps it keep it down on the inside so it's not flapping everywhere.
Exactly. And that's what's nice is you do have creative freedom. I mean, honestly, you know, it'd be cool too is if you used the applaud and you top stitched with the applaud with the wiper stitch. I would love to see that. I know a couple people asked to see that. We're not showing that today, but maybe in a future project we will. But you just have creative freedom, and I want to let you guys know that. So now, once we do that and we press that seam and we use that tailor's clapper, we are now going to line up the front to this. And now here's the important part. This is going to be one of the difficult parts of the pattern. And Genevieve wants to show it, but we have this little dot here, and we're going to match it with a dot on here. Now, I'm using a friction heat erase pen, and I'm just going to draw this little line, just so we know. This is going to erase with the steam, so we don't have to worry about it permanently marking. Now, at least we've tested it with these quilting cottons, and it goes away. If you're using a different fabric, test it out first on a little swatch. Sometimes, depending on the fabric, it can leave a little bit of a mark. So always do a little test before you do that. And then about halfway through that line, I'm just going to draw a little crosshair. So we're going to take a pair of scissors.
Where did our scissors go? I think I put them back in the drawer. There we go. Okay.
And we are just going to snip there. It calls for that on the pattern. Now it's a little bit of a sharper turn, but the reason we're doing this is to give a little bit of ease. Now don't snip all the way to that dot because we're going to serge this, and I think that gives it a little bit of a cleaner finish. On the pattern it said to notch it. We're just going to serge it. I think it's a little bit of a cleaner finish, and if you press it open, you don't have to notch it. You could serge both ends. I'm going to let Genevieve show this part. So
we're just going to pin this to the pattern here.
And
lining up our dots.
Do you need that pattern piece to erase it? The dot. I mean, I know it goes in that.
We should be. I think we'll be able to line it up okay. I'm also a little bit of a rebel. Sometimes I don't exactly follow the dots. I go by the ends of the fabric here too. So I will say when I was doing it, I was freaking out because I thought my pieces weren't big enough. You're not pinning to this part over here. You're going to start at this corner on the upper part of the skirt. This is for our armhole later on in the dress. So right where our notch is where that corner meets. So I'm just gonna start by pinning this one end and then,
we're using these magic pins, and I gotta say, these are like the nicest pins that I have used. They are very thin, very lightweight. You can sew over them if you want to, which I'm curious. Do you guys like to sew over pins, or do you take them out? Sometimes I do both, so.
And then we're just going to follow along. You don't need to pin super religiously, you know. I go every couple inches, but, you know, go to your comfortability. If you feel like you need a bunch of pins, go for it. But I try to get enough in there to make it stable enough that I know it won't move around as I sew. So you see here, I'm a little extra on this end. So if that happens, I just try to line it up and go back. This one feels much more curved than it was when I was putting mine together. Okay. So I'm a little over on this end. So if I find that it feels like something's off as I'm pinning, I just go back from the one side and make sure it's all coming together straight. You don't want any folds in the fabric. There's no gathers or like pin tucks in this pattern. Just really easy straight stitches all the way around. Yeah. Sometimes if I'm working with, just like in quilting, if you have corners that come together like this, you can try to notch them together. Okay, there we go. And we're ready to sew. Okay. We'll take this back over to our Jubilant. Okay.
And we also have that 5/8 inch guide foot. So the regular foot that comes with your machine is going to be your J foot, which is your utility stitch
The
foot.
regular one.
But we saw this 5/8 inch guide foot last show, which was 2 weeks ago, and we were like, this is perfect for when we're sewing a simplicity pattern. This way we don't have to question if we're going under or beyond that 5/8 inch seam allowance. So we wanted to test that out for you guys today.
Can I have one more pin?
One more pin?
Yeah, I'm just sure. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to line it up with my 5/8 foot here, the edge of my fabric, finding the petal. There it is. Okay. Start out slowly, back stitch, and I like to feel along while I'm going to make sure the fabric isn't folding on itself underneath. I'll take my pins out just to be a good little sewer. Okay, once I get to that dot, I'm just going to lift my foot up but keep my needle in and pivot so that my fabric stays in line with that foot. You might not need to a whole lot. Ooh, my little pin got stuck under here. There it is. Okay. I like to adjust my fabric as I go, especially with something like this dress that has a lot of excess that I'm working with. Just making sure it's supported on a table or somewhere next to me helps keep things from dragging and the fabric from shifting, so I know I'm going to have a nice clean finish every time. And then once I get to the end, back stitch again. Make sure our needle is up. Whoop. Got a little stuck on the edge foot there. Okay, and I'm gonna snip this. Here we go. Back to here. So, just to give you a preview of what we should look like after that is sewn. You can see our little dot came through a little bit here, but it'll go away with the heat.
And that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So
we have a few strings that came through here from our little intersection, but we're just going to take our snips.
We love those squeezy snips. Yes. If we could put those in the bubble real quick. That I love for trimming those loose threads in between, and definitely trim as you go.
Yeah.
Now, I did see a lot of people talk about if they sew over pins. So I sew on a machine that's similar to the Accomplish. So sometimes that's why I just sew over pins. I know you should take them out as you go, but hey, we are rebels here. But for burning up, probably don't do that.
We've also been sewing for a while, so maybe if you're new to it, try to take them out as you go. You don't want to bend or break a needle at any point.
Don't get to the bad habit of me,
Yes.
because I will say sometimes hitting a pin when sewing over it, then I'm just like, I shouldn't have did that. So
And when you're doing it, just if it's your first time and you're new to garment sewing with taking out pins, just take your time. I know when I was younger, I would get really nervous about coming in too fast and taking the pins out. Take your time, go slow, you'll get used to it. Yeah, so did you want to serge this one, or are we doing
so I'm
our
going to show them. So
alternatives?
one thing I do like to do beforehand is I always kind of press my seam a little bit before I serge.
Switch places.
That might be a little bit, some people say it's a little bit much to do that, but I find it just gives it a little bit of a better finish. So we'll just take our iron here, and we love these irons right here because they stay on for 2 hours. They're cordless. You get really nice steam with them too. So we're just going to iron that. So I'm just kind of ironing that seam allowance. And I'm going to take a pair of scissors real quick. I'm going to just trim where it is a little bit of excesses, just so it's a little even. That way when I'm serging, I know that we're going to cover over that. And then from serging, we're going to serge from this side here because I'm going to press it up. There is kind of a front and back to a serge. So I'm a little picky, a little bit like, no, it has to be that way. So it doesn't truly matter, but I'm a little bit special with things. So we'll go over to the serger real quick. And then I'm just going to serge through that. And so if we see like a little bit of our seam allowance didn't fully match up, you're usually fine, especially at this dress. It's a very forgiving dress, but I just kind of trim to that part so that it's even. And I just zip right through that.
Yes. Anne says we make this look so easy. We've both been sewing for a long time, so.
We make that tail. See, there is a cutter, so I didn't need to make the loop. I'm used to mine at home where it doesn't have a cutter, and sometimes I make the loop as a quicker way. But there we go. And now we'll come back to the ironing board. And so I will say, a lot with sewing clothes, it's going to be a lot of, you're going to sew something and then you're right back to the ironing board. It's sometimes can be a little bit, I don't want to say tedious, but you do get used to it. So now I do this a certain way. I usually press it flat again, and then I'll press it upwards. And so I'm just going to trim those loose tails real quick. Now let's do this.
I do think ironing is relaxing. I agree, Sherry.
Oh, I totally agree. So I get made fun of from my friends for this. I iron my clothes every morning.
No,
they say that I'm a psychopath for it, but I'm just like, no, it's like...
It's nice little, it's meditative almost.
Exactly.
I'll put on a little show. I got my sewing. I have my iron set up.
And so I am using that tailor's clapper again. I like to do that. It really gives a nice press to those seams. So, and the reason I like to do it with the serge, or finishing the edge, is because on the pattern, they have you notch it and make little clips into it. And I think that with washing it over time, that's gonna fray. And I don't want my clothes fraying in the wash. So that's why I like to do it this way, to have a nice clean finish. We're showing you how to make clothes that are gonna last, that you could wash, wear, because who wants to make something and have it fall apart in the wash? And I'm even going to press from the top too a little bit and just really make that a nice crisp seam. And I think that this might have been the hardest part of the dress, is just that little clip.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's just straight stitching our pieces together. Comes together really simple, really easy.
Exactly. And so once we do that, that's going to be the front of your dress, and the back is going to be constructed practically the same way. So I went ahead and I started the back already. We could just kind of see a little bit close side by side. We don't have too much space. So the next step that we're going to show you is going to be the pockets. So do not be scared. I want you to look at us. These are the easiest pockets you could do, because we thought this dress didn't have pockets at first, and we were like, we have to add pockets.
Yes.
But it does have a pocket piece in it. It's super easy. The directions might make it seem a little complicated, but we're just going to simplify this for you guys, because I remember that was like my biggest fear when I started sewing was pockets. So
okay, let's make some room here. Okay. Get our pieces all ready. So for our pockets, we have our pieces cut out. I believe it has you cut out in the same fabric as the big piece here. It really doesn't matter if you want to use. In mine, I did one at the top and one of the back, so it's a little different color on each side. If you just have extra fabric lying around, you can do that as well. So each of these have our little dots on them. It's not just polka dot fabric, but we have our dots that we lined up with our pattern. We're going to go find the corresponding dots on the side of the skirt and line up. John has a nice little trick here, is we added a straight line coming out of the fabric just with our friction pen. We're going to line those up and pin them. Whoops, this is upside down. I'm going to switch pockets. So we're lining these up right sides together.
I just got really exciting news. Guess what? Ryan just texted me. Our patterns just came in. So,
yay! Oh my gosh, what great timing.
That is, like, I think, best timing. And so, I mean, hey, if you buy a kit, it will probably end up getting maybe even cut today. And we could just send them out together. So that's perfect.
So
that's like the best news all week.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what great timing that we can tell you live. Okay, 2 little pins, and then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. This might be a little harder to find with our print. Let me see. Oh, there they are. Okay.
And so I'm just going to let them know a little bit ahead of time.
Yeah.
So this seam allowance is going to be the only difference in seam allowance for the entire pattern. We're going to sew this at 1/4 of an inch, which is what the pattern calls for. And then we are changing one little thing, which is going to be the next step after we sew this at 1/4 of an inch.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to take this over. And we've done the same thing on the back side of the fabric as well, of the dress as well. So, to our 1/4 of an inch. Make sure my fabric's all lined up. Back stitch again. And here we go. I'm going to go fast. Take your time though. Everyone always is commenting on how fast I sew when I'm in the studio doing something for a Thursday night show. But I'm going to flip around. Make sure my threads are all set. And do the same thing on this side. Oops. And there we go. Okay, we're going to go back over and press these open so that our pockets, I do put the pedal to metal, Carol. All right, we're gonna press our pockets so that the right side is going out. So it's gonna look a little silly right now, but once it gets put together, it'll make a little bit more sense. Okay. Oops. There we go. Okay.
You know what, Troy? I think that's a great way of describing it. The teardrop is facing down. So
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's a great way to describe it.
Ooh, I keep knocking this camera back here. Okay, so our next step. We'll go through how we're changing it. John, do you want to?
Yes. So on the pattern, it said to stitch out 1/4 of an inch again, but here's the only thing where I don't like. You just sewed 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so you might not catch that little bit of a seam allowance right there. And I'm just going to zoom in. That's Kate real quick. So because we sewed that out 1/4 of an inch, we're going to come over here and we're going to sew it another 1/4 of an inch. That I didn't like because you're not catching the seam. So we're just going to edge stitch along the pocket piece. So that's about 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch. It all depends on how close you like to sew. We're going to show that, but I went ahead and did it on the back piece already. And we could just zoom in so I could give you guys an idea. So this is edge stitching right along that piece right there. So that's usually about 1/8 to 1/16. So it's like right along the edge of that. You don't want to stitch in between seams, but that's what we're going to do and just kind of take it down from 1/4 of an inch.
So for reference, this is at step number 13 in our pattern, just in case you need to reference it later. I'm going to edge stitch this real quick, and then we'll be good to go. Not only does this give it a nice little professional finish, it helps us make sure our pocket lining is going to stay on the inside and not pop out on us. Ooh. Okay. Ooh. Started a little fast there.
And you know what a nice feature about the Jubilant is too, is we do have that speed control option.
Yes.
So
Point that out in a second.
I do know that some people are newer to sewing here. And if this is your first time watching us, I would love to know, because I feel like that is such an honor for us with our first show and this being your first time watching us.
Just caught. You can see here I've just got the edge of that seam allowance. Yeah. And there's it from the front. All right, we're going to do the other side. But yeah, what were our first projects?
Oh, yeah, I want to talk about that. First projects. So other than my sewing class in high school, which I made a pair of pants, which did not turn out well whatsoever. And they were so big on me, they didn't fit. I had no idea what I was doing. It looked terrible, right? I didn't give up from there. I actually went ahead and I bought my sewing machine. And as crazy as this sounds, my first project that was by myself, no help, was a denim jacket, which was a simplicity pattern.
Ambitious.
So, can I tell you what? That denim jacket did not turn out that well. I might have surged through the seam allowance. And I put together the sleeve with fabric glue, but the second one and the third one came out a lot better. What about you, Genevieve?
Well, I started sewing with my grandma. She made all my Halloween costumes growing up, and we would like design them together, and I picked out what I wanted to be and all the fabrics.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun.
But I think my first project was, I started with American Girl doll clothes. So I think probably one of my first projects. Oh, you know what? That's a lie. I made a pillow, and I still have that pillow on my bed. Every night.
That I guess that would be a lie for me too. Back in middle school when we had middle school sewing class, I made a pillow and we did like a little felt outline on it, and mine was like a pineapple, I think.
Cute.
So, quite the jump.
Yeah. Very first pillow, American Girl doll clothes. Clothes for me. Is my progression.
I love making clothes for me. That's
It's
like
the
my
best.
favorite thing. So it's like I don't want to do anything else other than sew clothes. So
Yes. All right. So we're
Okay.
ready for the exciting part.
yes, the front to back. So once we go ahead and we do that for both the front and the back with those pockets, and do make sure that those are lining up in those dots. That is one important part, because when we're putting those front to backs, you just want to line that up. Because
Something looks off here. So it looks like we might have mismarked something, because one of these pockets is much higher than the other. Do you see that? Or is this just me?
no, I think
No,
it's just the
we're
way the
good?
dress is tilted.
Don't freak
So
out.
we're looking at things on an angle here, and we have a small area. So like I said, we're human. Sometimes we look at things the wrong way. Now, next step is going to be shoulder seams,
There we go.
correct?
Yes.
So I'm going to just trim this little loose thread here real quick. And we will pin right there. So we're going to pin at the shoulders. So with this fabric, I want to say, and I'm going to show this technique a little later, we're not doing it with this dress, but if you cut a strip of straight flex at 3/4 of an inch, you can apply it to the back, because the way that we're going to fold this and serge it, we're serging it to the back so you wouldn't see it on the inside, but it gives that shoulder seam a little bit more stability. It's more of an advanced finishing technique. So if this is your first project, don't worry about it, but I might post something a little later in our Facebook group just about a couple different finishing techniques that I like to use that you could add to any of these patterns, because it's kind of universal for some of them. So, but once we pin like this, we're going to sew our shoulder seams at 5/8 of an inch. So
Take this. If you notice real quick here, don't freak out that your neckline isn't matching up, because it's the front and back. They're cut a little bit differently, so you have a little bit more room at the neckline that'll be in the front. Okay, let's do our shoulders.
yes, and you know what my favorite way to describe clothes is? Clothes are all just tubes of fabric that fit us a different way.
Yeah.
That's the best way to describe clothing, if it makes it sound a little less scarier for someone.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most eye-opening parts about starting garment sewing, is that a lot of things are just, you're making a tube. Okay. Just the first one, and we're going to go to the second one. Yeah, same thing here. Your front and back shoulder parts aren't going to line up exactly on the sides. That's just for that extra accommodation for, your shoulder back area. Okay, there we go. Whoop. Goodness. There we go. Snip our threads real quick, and then quick iron before we go over to the serger. Where did our snips go? Trying to get it as perfect as possible. Keep missing it. Okay, there we go.
And I will say, sewing or snipping the loose threads as you're going is
Mhm.
important, because I will tell you now, sometimes when I used to not do that, those loose threads would get caught and then it would start pulling and I'd be like, and then you have to
Mhm.
go back and seam rip a little bit. So trim as you go.
It's also harder, like once you're done, to go back and try to find all of the little things that you know that you missed or that you thought you know you missed. But
Mm-hmm.
all right, I'll let you do your ironing.
Alrighty, so I'm going to show that one more time. I just love using that tailor's clapper, especially because pressing is one of the most important things when sewing a garment, because it really, I will say this, you can make a cheaper garment look a lot nicer when it's ironed, because you don't want to wear something that's wrinkly.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's what goes back to my friends judging me because I iron my clothes in the morning. And maybe ironing the jeans is too much, but I mean, it's just part of me now. So, so we're just gonna serge those seams again. And so, I guess to give a quick little detail, right, is front to back. I'm gonna serge these, and then they're gonna be pressed to the back. If we see that, so I'm gonna serge this way with the front of the dress in my hand. So you'll have that deeper neckline, and we're going to serge this side up. It truly doesn't matter too much, but I like to do it this way just because I'm a little particular. And then when you get to there, rather than cutting, you could just start that next piece after a little bit in between. And that saves you a little bit of time, actually, because then we'll just snip that, and we just did both in one go rather than one side snip, the other side snip. We just did both in one go.
Mm-hmm.
So,
John, could you tell us what setting we have the serger on?
so I will take a look at it. I believe I have it at the default. So, 1 second. I will tell us what I have it set to. Because it's not a knit, I didn't adjust anything on the serger. So, I have it at neutral right now, and I have the blade cutting width at, for to celebrate, 5.5. So I'm just going to tilt it a little bit. And then I have this set to 3. So I think for this next step, when we sew the side seam, I might show putting the blade down. It might be a little bit of an easier way to show that. So, but this is just what I have everything set to on the Celebrate. I didn't mess with any of the upper tension dials. I have all those set to 4. So I usually don't mess with the serger too much. Sometimes just the width if I am doing a knit where I want it to be a little bit closer together. So
Okay. And I've gone and started pinning our pattern together. So now, because we have pockets, this is when we're going to line them up just like this. And when we sew, instead of going straight all the way down like a regular side seam, we're going to go down. And when we get to the pocket, we go all the way around the pocket and then back down again. So just pinning our sides together, making sure everything is lining up. I usually go, when I'm lining up bigger pieces like this, start with the ends and make sure those ends are together and then go inward. I also change it up based on, what I'm sewing. So
that I do want to say, so I am using a 4-thread overlock. With wovens, you can use a 3-thread. I usually use a 4-thread overlock stitch for any time I'm serging anything. Especially with knits, you have to use a 4-thread because a 3-thread will kind of turn it into a flat lock seam. So I always just use the 4-thread just for everything that I do. I just find it's a little bit nicer too. So.
Okay, got one side pinned. Just gonna scooch up here for our other side.
And so pinning the pockets, like Genevieve did say too, that's definitely the important part. We want that to line up. And then I do want to give them one tip to make this a little bit easier, I think, because we're sewing at that 5/8 inch seam allowance. And when we're going to turn by the pocket, I think that if we mark that with the pen, that's how we know when to stop and pivot. So I'm going to show them that.
Yeah. When I'm also pinning long seams like this, every once in a while, I like to turn my fabric over just to make sure I'm lined up properly and that I'm not accidentally pinning a little bit off. Okay.
Okay, so I am going to show how we're going to just mark this at 5/8 of an inch. So I do have in our lineup this pink ruler because why not? It's a pink ruler. I think I like this one a lot better than the yellow one. So, but on that ruler, and we're going to get a couple new ones in too that maybe have like 1/4 inch grids, but we could use this one because I'm going to just zoom in a little bit here. If we just zoom in at the bottom inch increment, so we can see with the point of my pen, that is 1/8 of an inch right there. So we're going to do 5/8 of an inch, kind of using these crosshairs. So if I kind of line that up, if we kind of look around there, I'm lining this right there mark up with the edge. And I could just do a little dot or even just a little marking like that. And that's going to tell me, okay, we're going to pivot here and we're going to start sewing at 5/8 of an inch. Sewing curves can sometimes be a little tricky at first, but truthfully, when you start to get the hang of it, it becomes secondhand nature. So, and I'm also making sure that I'm going up 5/8 of an inch from that outer edge of the fabric too. So think of it kind of like a 5/8 inch square. And we're marking that up from the corners of those pockets. That way, when we sew that, we kind of know what we're doing. And so we're going to show one side. I'm going to show a couple things with the next step as Genevieve will sew the other side. So
Let's do it. Okay. Just going to adjust this a little bit. Okay.
and I will say, those heat erasable pens, that's where these come in handy,
Yeah.
especially if garment sewing. Because imagine being at the machine and then having a question, oh, do I have to back up a couple stitches or did I go too far? That's why I love these. So
I also used one to mark my pattern pieces with the number of the pattern piece. Again, just because this does have so many different pieces and they're very similar looking, that really helped me to make sure, okay, number 1 is going on to number 2. Here's where they connect to number 3. Okay.
and so we're pivoting there.
Yeah, here I am at the pivot, right. Bringing my presser foot up, leaving my needle in. If I don't, it doesn't look like I have the square on this side, so I'm just gonna eyeball this. This presser foot really helps it out, so I can see I'm not exactly on it right now. Did you do it on both sides, John?
I only did it on one
Ah,
side.
gotcha. Okay.
Okay. So definitely mark it on both sides.
No,
but
that's okay.
see, that's where this presser foot comes in handy
It
too. I
really
think this was the
does.
best find,
Yeah.
especially for garment sewing, because when I saw it, I was like, that would be perfect because I know all the seam allowance are 5/8 of an inch, so that even helps you kind
It
of
does.
eyeball it.
So
if
there
you
we
didn't
go.
have
I
the
just went
marking.
a couple stitches forward. This foot really does help out. So just to, if you don't have this foot, I would just wait till you get about a little bit past, maybe a little bit past the edge of the pocket. It's a little hard to see. If you're sewing, you're coming along. Once you get to like, you see that you can pass this edge right here, I would stop, lift up your presser foot, pivot, and try to see if you can line it up from there, and then just go in single stitches till you can get that correct seam allowance. And here I am sewing the curve, so I'll slow down a little bit so we can go through this. I'm going to make sure my fabric's lined up. Again, this presser foot really does help make sure that I'm staying in line with that 5/8 seam allowance.
And what it is nice about that presser foot is you could adjust it a little bit too, but knowing that it goes to that 5/8, I think that is like you need that, especially if you're just beginning off. I think that's like the best tool to use to help. Because I'm like watching this from our end, and I can just see how easily it helps with staying lined up with the curve, which I always say too, curves, super scary at first because they're not straight lines. We sometimes have to lift up our presser foot with the needle down, pivot a little bit.
I'm going to do that right now, actually. Yep.
And so doing that, what Genevieve just did, that will help, especially along those curves. Take your time. Curves can be one of the most difficult things, but once you do it so many times, you really do get the hang of it. So
otherwise, on this curve, I'm just putting a little bit of pressure on the fabric out here, and then using that to help manipulate it at an angle, and just going along slowly, making sure I'm moving the rest of the fabric as I come along. And I'm also trying to anticipate the curve a little bit. So right here, I'm going to have a little bit of a tighter curve. So I'm just going to watch ahead. And once the tip of this is going to hit it, I'm going to start to curve my fabric along there. You can also go forward. There we go. Okay, let's flatten out our fabric so we're not making any accidental gathers. And then I'm going to do the reverse of what we did on the other side. So I'm a little bit past the seam allowance from our pocket and for the rest of our seam here. I'm going to turn. I could use a little more. Turn back. A few more steps. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to move these threads out of the way. Hello. Okay. Always adjusting.
So I would love to hear from everybody in the comments, if you guys have a second. What was your first sewing project? Just in general, whether it was a pillow or a garment, I would just love to hear. So everybody kind of has their own sewing journey.
Yeah.
I actually made a pillow in middle school. I just
Oh my
remembered.
goodness.
Kate did make a pillow. All right, Kate sews, everyone. She has to jump in
go.
for us.
Gone all the way around and all the way down. So when I open it up, little sneak peek. Ta-da! We've got a nice little pocket.
Yep, that is a beautiful inseam pocket. So that's the term for these types of pockets.
Yes.
Is they call them inseam because it's kind of hidden within the seam.
I'm going to do the other side here.
Yep. And when Genevieve does the other side, I'm going to show the next step. So on the pattern here, and actually at the beginning, and I was supposed to show this at the beginning, but it does call for fusible interfacing. So we have our favorite, Shapeflex 101. I prefer this interfacing actually when I'm making garments, especially with woven garments, because it's a nice woven and I like to use a woven with a woven. Interfacings could be a little bit difficult, but I know for the projects we're doing, ShapeFlex 101 works for all of them because that is one that I use for almost everything when I interface something. So we're going to be interfacing our inside collar pieces. So this isn't the collar, but this is the facing. I couldn't think of the word for a second. So we have the front and the back, and on the instructions, it calls to interface them. And so I want us to cut out the ShapeFlex a little bit of a different way, and I have a reason for this. So we're going to cut this out on the bias, which with clothing and garments, you will be doing this quite a lot with cutting things on the bias. The reason I want to cut the ShapeFlex on the bias, and it doesn't call for that in the pattern, this is just a little tip and trick that I've learned, is it's going to still let your piece have a little bit of mobility, because otherwise it's going to be a lot more stiffer and you might not be able to bend it as much. So that's the only reason I prefer to do it on the bias. And rather than using the pattern piece, I'm just lining up the actual piece that I cut. I folded that ShapeFlex on a 45-degree angle on the fold, since these pattern pieces were cut on the fold. And when it does ask for you to cut something on the fold, it means you fold your fabric, you line up that edge of that pattern piece with the fold on the fold. You don't want to be off from the fold, you don't want to be over the fold, line up that edge right on the fold. And so I'm going to just put 2 pins in that real quick. Usually when I like to cut out my pattern pieces too, you can pin, or I like to use pattern weights, which I don't have any right now. We will probably have those. And for our second show, we ordered a couple tools that you're going to really want. They're going to help you, especially with a lot of these projects. And we're all about making life a lot easier. So, and I am reading all these comments of the projects you guys started, and that sounds so fun. I saw an Aloha dress, Barbie doll clothes, A-line skirt. So I'm happy to hear that we all had a fun sewing project for the first one, whether it went well or not. I mean, my pants and my jacket didn't go too well, but I never let that stop me. So, and see how I'm just cutting that out. So, and don't cut this part on the fold. Don't trim this. You don't want to do that. I've made that mistake before and you'll have to recut it. So, and it doesn't have to be super perfect because we are going to be kind of trimming off any excess of the ShapeFlex. So when I learned pattern making, they sometimes said you want to redraft the whole pattern piece and then shrink it 1/8 of an inch on all sides for any type of interfacing. I don't like to do that, to be honest. I kind of take the lazy way and I'll just recut that same piece and I will just kind of trim off the excess. So we're going to show this part now, and this is probably one of the most important parts, especially with interfacing any type of clothing garment. Super, super important. So on the instructions, it says to press. And I want to be very clear here. I'm going to just slide this in a little bit so that Kate can see. When we take our iron and we're pressing, we're going to do this. We're going to hold and press down, and you can use that tailor's clapper too to really give it a nice press. The reason why we're going to do that, and we don't want to go side to side and front and back, that will stretch out the pattern piece and it will distort it and throw off your seam allowances. So when we apply ShapeFlex, which we're going to place the glue side, which has these little bumps on it, the other side is smooth, we're going to place that onto the wrong side of the fabric. And now this is bias cut, so place it a little bit carefully. If you do the bias cut method that I showed, the reason I like that is it just gives it a little bit more mobility on the inside and it makes it flow a little bit better, stretch out a little bit better on the inside. That way it's not as stiff and you have a little bit of more playing room when you're sewing that. And see how I am just pressing down? Because we don't want to distort that. So this is super important. And you could take that tailor's clapper, kind of go over that. That gives it a nice press. And because my Shape Flex was a little bit over, stuck a little bit to the mat, but with that wool mat, it comes off real easy. And we'll just trim off the little bit that's sticking out, just so we don't throw off our seam allowances. That's why I love, love, love using these rotary cutters. It's like a perfect cut with curves. So
I see we're talking in the comments about ironing our patterns beforehand, which is perfect because I can't remember if we mentioned this or not. You can iron your pattern paper beforehand. Just make sure you're using a low setting on your iron without steam.
yes, do not use steam. It will definitely...
Wet paper is not good.
Yes, I will say that. Definitely, you don't want to do that. I've done that before. And I will say these patterns, with them being made out of tissue paper, they kind of, if you get them wet, they will kind of fall apart a little bit. So just be mindful of that. And don't iron them on high. I would iron it on the low setting too.
I ironed ours before I started and then was still able to fold it back up just how it came in the package. So it holds its memory pretty well.
Genevieve, I will say, I was so surprised because she sewed the first sample that she's wearing now, and I went to sew it the other day. She had that pattern folded up perfectly in it, and I was just like, oh my gosh, she folded it up perfectly for the envelope.
One of my biggest sewing pet peeves is when patterns are just kind of stuffed back in the envelope. It's so messy and bulgy.
And so I think at some point I might show them one of these days how they can transfer their pattern
Oh, yeah.
from the Simplicity pattern maybe onto pattern paper.
Yeah.
That way you can kind of adjust it a little bit. We might show that in the future, especially pattern hacking and turning this dress into a blouse or adding elastic to
Absolutely.
it. But we want to keep this super beginner friendly right now. So now the next part is we're going to sew these seams together. So I'll let Genevieve take over.
Yes. I'm just going to line these up. With this, just because it's such a small seam, if I was doing it on my own, I might not pin it at all. But I'm going to put the pin a little bit outside what I know the seam allowance is going to be, so I don't have to worry about it coming out or about having to pull it out, since it's just a couple inches that we're sewing here. Yeah. Oop. I'm going to be very particular about this. Okay. And again, it's going to bubble a little bit here, especially with our Shape Flex. That's okay. It's not going to line up perfectly edge to edge because it's a front and a back. So the one piece of it has some extra allowance for our shoulders. Okay. And this is still a 5/8 seam.
And so we're coming closer to a finish on this dress. So
Oh, yeah.
we're going to show what we promised in the beginning too about if you don't have a serger, how you could finish off the edges of those seams. So I was kind of just sewing a couple pieces in the background that we're going to show that here at the end.
There we go. Okay, here's our finished. Yeah, you see it's a little bit uneven, but again, that's okay. It's designed to be like that. When I open it up, it's a nice little even circle. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Alrighty.
I would say this is also a good time now that we have our pieces put together to do a little try on, see if we like the fit. I think I even did it a step before this to make sure, the neckline was okay, our shoulders were okay. But very excited.
Exactly. And I will say, so if you feel this dress is too loose on you, and you wanted to take in that side seam.
Yes.
I can just kind of briefly explain this. So probably from this curve point right here, I would say maybe about 5-6 inches down. And we showed those curved rollers the last time. What you could do is if you said, I want to have this come in maybe 2 inches at the bottom, take one of those curved rollers, curve it a little bit, and then use your straight roller and connect that line from a 2-inch dot. And then that could bring that dress in a little bit for you. You might have to go back, redo those pockets, and readjust them, or you could take the pockets off. So it's totally up to you.
Yeah.
But this next step,
Mm-hmm.
and
Where are we?
I did want to show that we were pressing these seam allowances to the back. I don't think I did that, so I'm just going to do that real quickly. And this is why I love these sleeve boards, is because I can just kind of slide this through the armhole here. And this is why we use these a lot. And I'm just going to press those seams real quick. And if you want to make sure those permanently stay there, you can top stitch from the other side. I did with the sample dress. For our demo, we're just going to kind of leave it loose. It doesn't call for that on the pattern instructions, but you could totally top stitch at about 1/8 of an inch.
I did as well. You can do it on one side, so you can do it on both sides.
Exactly.
Up to you.
Or use that applaud wiper stitch for all of those top stitches on those seams. I would have loved to did that. We might have to do one off camera and show you that. We might have an applaud day. I know a lot of people would love to see stuff with it. So
Okay. So at this point in the pattern, we're around step 15. This pattern kind of mashes a bunch of steps together. So 15 is from putting the interfacing on our neckline all the way to attaching our neck pieces. So I'm going to lay my fabric out so I can get this whole neckline as flat as I can. If not, that's okay. I'm going to kind of pick it up and go bit by bit. This is where it's important to remember which is our front and which is our back. So if you end up labeling your pieces, you shouldn't have too big of a problem. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold it up again. Okay, so my front is going to be on this side. My back is closer to me. So starting at our shoulder seams. How does it say to do this? Whoops, actually before that, we're going to turn our dress inside out. So we're doing this right sides together again. So here it is, all put together. Look how cute. Oh my gosh. This is so pretty.
cute.
This fabric collection is just so pretty. So front is still on this side. We're going to take our shoulders and match those up first. I'm going to give these a quick press.
And there is one thing that I'm going to show at that. So let's press those open, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to show them
that's
one
right.
way. So you can serge those on the edges because it's on the inside and it's the facing. Sometimes we don't worry about serging parts that are like that, where raw edges are going to be hidden in between layers. But what we are going to do is we are just going to briefly serge around the outside of this, around it, and that's just to close off that raw edge. So I'm just going to briefly show that. So, and I think this step right here is a great way to practice kind of serging a little bit of a curve. And so we could just see, I am just taking my time a little bit there, keeping it lined up. I'm just trimming off a tiny little bit. And we could see here that folded over. So let me make sure my needles are down. I'll lift up my presser foot and I can kind of position that so that it's flat. There we go. So if you notice that and you're serging, lift up that presser foot and then put it back down just so you can flip that so that they're flat. I've sometimes serged my allowances to one side when I wanted them to be open. So, and same with adjusting. If you start going off, it's curved. I am sewing on a weird angle so my head's not in the way of the camera. Usually I'm like hunched over my machine just staring at it, but sewing from an angle could be a little bit of a challenge at times. So there's that. There's one more thing I'm going to show you guys with serging, which is going to be the inner seam allowance of the dress from the side seams. I almost forgot to show that. I'm going to show that in a different way, and we might serge without the blade because you don't want to cut into that pocket. I can do it because I've had a lot of practice with the serger, but I'm going to show without it so that we kind of see. And now there is one way I wanted to show this too. So this is a new product that we're selling. This is a 10-inch loop turner. And so we can use this for a variety of things. We're going to be using it in the future, especially with spaghetti straps and other things. But what you could do is if you go through a couple of those stitches here, and they do make a smaller one, which we will carry as well, which is a little easier for this, but we can go ahead, go through one of those stitches or a couple of them, and then we could just wrap our serge and pull that through for a cleaner finish, and then trim off the excess. And that embeds that in the seam. I just kind of showed that a little bit quickly there, but that so you don't have it trimmed and you can kind of embed it in the seam, makes it a little bit cleaner. So.
All right, there we go. Back
So
to
I'll
where
let
we
Genevieve show that part.
Okay. While John was doing that, I was just ironing out our side seams a little bit. Nothing special or fancy. So laying this back out, we have our front and our back. I'm going to take this wonderfully serged collar, and first we're going to line up the side seams. And I like to pin those first. It's not super duper important that these line up like perfectly flush, like as if you were quilting, but if we can just get it as close as possible to reduce that bulk and so that our seams are nice and clean, even on the inside. And then from here, you can kind of just pull it a little bit taut and bring it up so that our seams are together and throw a couple pins on there.
So the reason I did cut that on a bias too is it keeps that piece a little bit flexible. So let's just say you accidentally sewed that seam allowance out like an inch rather than 5/8. You'd be able to stretch it a little bit. So it just gives you a little bit of extra ease because if you use the regular grain of Shape Flex, I found it made it a little bit stiff and I was having a hard time kind of trying to position it. So that's why I like to do the bias cut.
Just getting the string off. Okay, so we're going to take this over to our machine. And this is another curve that we're sewing on. When I'm doing a neck hole or an armhole like this, I like to take the bottom part of my machine off so I can loop it around on the inside. And I believe this is still a 5/8 seam, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Actually, let me check. Yes, it is a 5/8 inch seam.
See, this way I'm just looping it around my machine so that...
Some patterns, they have facings with 1/4 of an inch, but on this one, it is still 5/8. So.
Yes. So. Really make sure we're not overlapping any of our fabric. Doing it this way makes it so that, you know, I'm not sewing our neckline to a different part of our dress. Whoop. So. This I am going to take a little bit slower. Just making sure I can, as I'm going, making sure my edges are lining up, that everything is staying flat. get that pin out. Again, you're welcome to use more pins than I am. This is a little bit of a trickier. I wouldn't use too many because at that point you're going to be worrying more about pulling out your pins than you are making sure you're sewing nice and steadily. Okay. I'm turning the dress as I go as well so that it's not twisting or warping in any way that's going to affect my stitching. Okay, I'm getting to the other shoulder here. You can see as I'm going, I'm kind of just pressing it flat with my fingers. That's where that bias cut really helps us. And because this is a curved seam that kind of goes around our neck, it's gonna wanna bubble a little bit on its own, but we're able to just kind of pull it out flat thanks to that curve. And adjust as we go. Okay. Getting into our last. And again, because this is a curve and our guide here is flat, you're going to want to pay attention further back as opposed to the center because our needle is more aligned with this part than it is up here. So as long as I'm watching that the edge of my fabric is just hitting on the back part of that, then I should be all set. And there we go. Ooh. I'm not pulling my thread hard enough. I'm getting these long tails. Okay. So there we are. What it's going to look like. And now we're going to, once we flip it over, we have a nice clean neckline. But we're not going to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. So I'm going to show one little technique too that's not in the instructions, but I really want to show it. So we can even use our squeezy snips for it.
Mm-hmm.
So at those seam intersections right there, we can reduce the bulk for before we do the understitch, which is the last little step of the neckline. And if we just go ahead and snip, we're not snipping all the way across, but we're just cutting out these little squares, just like that. So we'll do that for all of those sides on the inside and out of that seam. So, and we could do that for this side too. And reducing the bulk will make it a lot easier when we're doing that understitching or when we want to press it, and it makes it a little less bulky. It lays a lot nicer. So that is just one little tailoring technique that I could teach you guys today that isn't in that pattern. So once I learned this technique, I have not sewn any type of facing the same way as I used to in the instructions, because it does make it lay a lot nicer, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that to me is important. I want my clothes to feel like they were professionally made. I want to feel comfortable wearing them. And so this is definitely one great technique you could pick up from us in this. So, and now using that sleeve board, we could go ahead and we can press our seam allowances to this side. So we're going to press the seams outward. Just like that, correct? And then we'll understitch that, and then we'll fold like that, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to question myself for a second. So we go ahead, press. You don't want to set the iron on the cutting mat. I will tell you now, it will not end well. So put the iron onto the wool mat next to you. That's why it's nice to have both of these. So, and I think what we could do here too is make a couple snips to allow for a little bit of ease since it's a
Yeah.
curve.
You could also trim off a little bit of this excess as long as we're not getting too close to that stitch.
Yes.
And we are pressing it to the facing side,
Yes.
not
And
the dress side.
on the one that I made behind me, I did trim it to 3/8 of an inch. I found that was kind of my golden ratio. Just trimming that down to 3/8. I'm just going to leave this one as 5/8 right now and just put a couple snips in it. And so if we take our scissors, I like to do just a snip. Some say cut out a triangle, but I just kind of go around and I do a little snip throughout them. I try to evenly space them. So I'm doing about 2 inches apart. And what that does is that will give you ease so that you can kind of manipulate that seam a little bit better for the understitch. And so I think one of these days I might go a little bit more in depth, but just to keep it a little bit beginner friendly, this is kind of the basics of it. There's some more advanced ways that you could do it. And I'm not snipping all the way up to our stitching. I'm only doing about maybe 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 if I'm leaving it at 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. But if you are going to trim it down to 3/8, you probably don't need to put any snips in it. So I'll let Genevieve take over from here.
Okay. So next in our pattern. Okay. Now we're just gonna flip this over. I'm gonna flip it over all the way into the inside first, just so we can get a visual. Look how pretty. Okay. Some little pieces. Okay. So our next step is we're gonna be understitching the inside of our collar kind of to itself. So we're gonna go back in from this side, and I'm gonna be doing a really close stitch because we're keeping this 5/8 seam allowance. That's going to give us a lot to work with. So we're going to stitch around our collar right here so that we're stitching this part of our collar to our seam allowance. This is going to help it when we flip it on the inside. It's going to help it lay flat and not roll over. So I'm just going to go back. I don't really pin it for this part. I don't think you need to.
I don't pin for when I do
Yeah.
that. I usually just kind of pull it and lay it flat.
Yeah. Just some careful.
And so just going to show that. And you could do an edge stitch. I think if you're
Yes.
leaving it at 5/8 of an inch, you could do a 1/4 if that's a little easier for you. But I recommend the edge stitch. And just kind of for a little bit of sake of time, I didn't trim it down to 3/8. But I would probably do that if I was you and trim that seam allowance down to 3/8 rather than putting in little snips. We're just kind of doing a little bit of the fast ways.
So I'm just going to go really close. I'm going to line up the edge of my base pattern fabric with the inner edge of this foot and do it that way. And as I'm going, I'm both making sure that I'm hitting the seam allowance on the inside and pulling my fabric from my neck collar piece so that we don't have too bumpy of a seam. Whoop.
And here's a pair of snips for you to trim
Thank
that
you.
thread. So sometimes that has happened to me too, and that little loose thread will cause it to bunch up.
Every once in a while I do stop and like manually make sure that the fabric is flipped over on the other side.
And so as Genevieve's kind of doing that, I'm just going to show a couple things real quick. So we are getting close to the finishing of the dress. So there's two options of finishing this. You can do a bias binding around the sleeve, and it's not like a bias binding where it's going to show, it's kind of an inner binding. So that's going to be pattern piece number 12. And the way that it describes it in the pattern is it looks like you're folding it in half. So you'll fold this in half, and I believe you're sewing that at a 1/4 of an inch, and then you'll press it, and then you're going to top stitch along that side there. At least that's what I got from the pattern there. It tells you to sew the sides together. What you can do that I think might be just a teeny bit easier is, rather than doing that, because you got to be pretty close and make sure that it's exact, what I've done before is you cut it a little longer and you just wanted to cut a long strip. Usually when I do projects like that, I'll fold one end down, and then when I go and sew all of that around, so I'll just press it real quick to give a better visual. So that goes all the way around on the inside. If you go ahead and you press the end, that way you don't have to worry about sewing that seam or the raw allowance. You can just kind of overlap that, making sure that as you're going around that armhole, make sure that the folded edge, and you could even do a little stitch if you want to, it's not necessary to close that off, but fold it like that. And this is if you're doing a longer piece, so this piece might be way longer with the raw edge. And you could line it up as long as you have the folded side face down first when you start sewing. And doing that binding, going all the way around. And then when this overlaps, you stop when you hit that intersection. You could trim off the excess. You don't have to worry about folding it back, but then you could just easily fold over, and then this part will already be folded and you could just do your top stitch. That way might be a little bit easier actually, because it gives you a little bit of extra workaround. You don't have to worry about trying to make sure that you evenly pin out the ease if you sew it the way that's in the pattern. This is a way that I have done it for a long time. I think that's the easiest way, just from my experience. But if you want to try it the pattern's way too, you can. I think, Genevieve, did you do it the way that the pattern instructed?
I did
or?
the way the pattern instructed,
Okay.
which was a little tricky at some points. But it's really not that simple. You're basically with the pattern, I'll just go through it real quickly. You're folding in half, and then you're lining up the raw edge and sewing it along the edge of your sleeve that we make here. So you're taking the raw edge of this, fold it in half, and you sew it into a circle first. Line it up with the raw edge of the sleeve, go around, and then it has you fold over. Let me remember how I did this. It has you fold it over kind of like twice, and then sew on that other side.
Mm-hmm.
So not too.
Okay, so I think did I just kind of show that the same way then? I think I might have just read the pattern and read it a different way from a previous one I did, so nor what I said. Just do the way that Genevieve did it. And then there is an option B for the sleeve. We didn't do that one. We did the one with the binding. But the sleeve is pretty straightforward. Just do make sure that you match up those notches to the right spot. The part with the double notch, that's usually the back of the sleeve for any pattern. So just line those up, and you could sew around, serge it to finish off the seam, and then press them up. And you could also do the sleeve hem as instructed. I'm going to kind of brief over the hem a little bit. In the pattern, the way that they want you to hem the dress is fold up 5/8 and then fold up another 5/8. You could do it that way. You could do a blind hem. Once again, creative freedom. We're probably going to show hems one of these days, a little bit later down the road. I'm just going to show the easiest way to hem it though. And I'm not going to hem the full dress right now just because we're getting a little close on our time here. And I wanted to show a couple products that you might want to get for our next projects or for this one. But
Okay. So I did finish the collar. It's coming out a little wrinkly this time, which I'm not sure why it is, but this is live. We work through our problems. But essentially, we can see how nice of a little flat, beautiful edge we get there. And it doesn't say this in the pattern, but if you wanted to go ahead and top stitch along the edge too on the outside, that would be a nice little design feature to add, but completely up to you.
totally. So even sometimes I'm not the biggest fans of these little mini facings on dresses. You could even do that binding
Oh yeah,
that you're doing on
absolutely.
the sleeve here. You could do that for the neckline of the dress if you prefer that. In fact, that might be the way to go. But we wanted to kind of show you with the pattern pieces and kind of how Simplicity's doing it. I know we changed a couple things.
Yes.
So I'm going to show the hem real quick. So
Absolutely.
I'm actually just going to show it on a scrap piece of fabric over here. But the easiest beginner hem, in my opinion, and I did lose those cut pieces of fabric.
Oh, there it is.
Here's one. This, I'm going to actually have Genevieve show stitch number, I believe it is 28 on the
Yes.
Jubilant. So if you don't have a serger, that's how you could do it.
These
and
are
then
some.
I'm going to show the hem.
Yes. So
the
here
next
on the
part.
Jubilant, we're going to switch. Right now we're on number 3, so our stitch guide is both here and up here. We're going to go over to number 28, which this is our overlock stitch. And like John said, this is a perfect alternative to a serger that is on most machines. If you want even more options, you can also use just a regular zigzag stitch. There's a couple like around 12, 13, 14 is really great for knits, but we'll save that for projects down the line. Right now we're going to go to 28. So I'm going to use our little knob all the way to 28. And if you saw as I'm moving, it actually recommends what foot you can use with this. I know there's also overlock foots that you can use with this stitch. So I'm going to line up the fabric right on the edge of the inside of the foot. And then you see as I start sewing, it goes in and out and back and forth just like a serger. So I'm right up on the edge of the fabric, making sure it stays lined up. The needle is going all the way out to the edge and then back in. And I'm going to go a little faster here so we can see. Ooh. And there is our overlocked. So very similar to what our serger looks like, a little bit more flyaway guys here. But that's a great alternative if you don't have a serger, or if you're maybe not ready to take that step, or if you're just a beginner. This stitch is on most machines. Yeah, and you can have fun adjusting the length and the width. Sometimes if I'm working on larger seams and I just don't want to wait as long, because this one does take a little bit more time because the needle is going in and out and it's just on a regular machine. It will take a little longer, but it still has the same great finishing effect.
Exactly. And I will say that it is a nice way to finish it if you're brand new to sewing.
Yes.
And maybe you only have one machine now, you're not ready to make the jump. But I'm going to show how easy it is to make a hem using your serger
Switch.
and sewing machine. So we're going to kind of look at the Celebrate real quick, and then we're going to jump back to the ironing board. So pretend that this is the bottom of your dress, that raw edge. And the way I like to do this hem, now you can fold up 5/8 of an inch and then fold up again and press and stitch around that. I have a little bit of an easier way, especially if you're a beginner. I think this is easier than doing the 5/8 inch. But let's serge this raw edge real quick. And we can see that is the difference. If you have a serger, it will make finishing the edges of your fabric 10 times faster. But so if we serge that edge, that's 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to jump over here real quick to the ironing board, and then we'll jump back to the sewing machine. And I think this is a really easy way to probably hem this dress, because I know that with 5/8 of an inch, you might start questioning well, is it 5/8 of an inch evenly around?
Mhm.
And I wish I would have just did this when I first started sewing, because it does take a little bit of time to practice those hems. So let's iron this. And then if we fold up, that's about 1/4 of an inch with that serger hem. So if we iron that and we give it a really nice press, and I like to use that tailor's clapper, so gives it a nice press. And then we could do one of two ways, actually. So if you wanted to fold up and just do it like that, we could just sew on the machine at about 1/4 of an inch. You might want to press it up a little bit more to 3/8 then, but I like to do this way for a double fold. That gives us closer to a perfect 1/4 of an inch fold for that dress hem. And now I want to talk about other ways that we could hem this dress and give people ideas.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
could do a blind hem
Yes.
on this dress. If you want to do a raw edge, sew at 1/2 an inch around and let it fray. That would be really cool. You could do that with the seams even,
Yes.
and have them be on the outside.
You can always use a hemming foot if you have one available.
Exactly.
So many different ways.
And so I'm going to jump back to stitch number 3, which is the default on this machine. And what's nice is with this foot, I could slide that guide over to 1/4 of an inch, drop our foot down, and I'm going to sew from this side. If you're using the same color thread in your bobbin and your top stitching thread, then you're good to do this. If you're using different threads, you would want to top stitch from the other side, but having it pressed nice is knowing that it's going to be perfect. I like to sew from this side, especially if you're a beginner. That way, we're going to have that stitch very close to that inner edge. And so this is a really easy way to hem any dress. Just staying on that edge at 1/4 of an inch. And we could lift up, trim. But doing that all the way around, you'll want to put a couple pins in it since it is on a curve. But I think that is one of the easiest ways to hem this dress. And look at that. That is a perfect 1/4 inch finished hem. That might be the best way to go about it. And then you could give everything a really nice press and iron.
Look at that.
And look at that. That's perfect.
Yeah,
So I think doing that
gorgeous.
for the dress might be the best way to hem it.
Absolutely.
There is one more step that I did want to cover. And on that inner facing, we are going to tack down. You can use hand stitches, or you could just stitch in a ditch with just a few stitches. I like to go to the widest if I'm doing it on the machine. And we're just tacking this part down on the inside of that seam to right where this stitching line of the original seam allowance is going to be. Or if you were hand stitching and you don't have to worry about that being perfect, then just stitch those parts. Or even if you fold out, you could do a couple stitches like that. That's to tack down the inside of that facing. Super important that you do that, otherwise it's going to flop out and you don't want that. So,
Yeah.
but we kind of hold up our dress.
Yeah.
So I'll probably finish the hem, since that will take a little bit of time off camera, and probably the binding. We didn't do one with the sleeves. I might put the sleeves on this one, but we'll just show this.
Look
I
how
think I'm showing
cute.
the back. So
Yeah.
I think this is a
Just
really
pockets.
cute beginner project. If you're
Yes.
doing this project, we definitely want to see you post it in the
Please.
group. Now, I did want to go over a couple products that I kind of wanted to show in between, but this is our first show, so we're still kind of learning everything, and we always joke, anytime I demo something for the first time, I'm surprised nothing went wrong.
I
The
think that
lights
went
didn't
pretty
fall
well.
on me.
Like-
The camera didn't break. Kate would
Yeah.
know with my first ever demo that I did. So we're just going to slide through these real quick again. So first things first, pattern notcher. definitely get this. You're going to want and need this, especially in the future when we are going to show some pattern modifications. That is down the line, and I will say that, but definitely get one of these. This is just a necessity. So the perfect punch too, especially punching out those little holes for those
Yes.
markings on that pattern, makes it a lot easier. I used to use scissors and I would snip it and it would just ruin it. I would tear the paper. So get one of these. You definitely need
Mhm.
that. Now, what we got next is going to be measuring tapes. So if you don't have a measuring tape somewhere hidden in the house, don't be afraid to get another one. This one's pink. It's really cute. So you'll want that to take your bust measurement, especially for this project. That's really the only measurement you're going to need because we kind of went through all those. I know we talked about it in the beginning. Just you only need the bust measurement for this dress. So serger threads. So I don't have all of them that I have in a lineup, but if you watched a replay, you're going to want 4 cones, and we are selling these in 2-packs, so you'll want to buy 2. I like to match my serger thread to kind of the color of the dress that I'm making or project that I'm making. So right here, I have 111, really pretty, or I'm sorry, that is sold 111. This color here is 0927. This is a light blue. This would have went perfect with our dress. We just showed it in gray, so it was a little bit easier to see. I also have white right here. So this is 8020. So definitely stock up on some spools of serger thread. And I forgot to tell them, today is 10% back. So anything that you buy, you get 10% back. I cannot
Excellent.
believe I forgot to tell them
Yeah.
that. So you don't use the notchers on the fabric, only the patterns so that you could use for markings. So another one that we have here, so we're going to go over our marking tool since we're talking about that. Not everybody likes the pens. I just happen to like the heat erasing pens. Those are my favorite. So we have the friction pens right here. And I also have the Bowen Vanishing Chalk. So these come away with heat. And the chalk disappears by itself after 5 days, I believe, or 3 to 5 days.
Oh, wow.
But it also disappears with the iron. So either way, they both heat erase, and I love that. Super, super important that you have these, especially with garment sewing, because having all those markings, lining up those notches, so it makes it a little easier.
Absolutely.
And then the next item that we have is going to be
Should we do
the...
some feet?
Let's show that pink roller one more
yeah.
time.
Where'd
So
it go? Oh, there it is.
I just can't get over...
So cute.
This is the prettiest roller, this like
really
really light
is.
rose pink roller. So ever since we got these, I just like don't want the yellow ones anymore.
Yeah.
I think that this one's a lot prettier. So this is a 6.5 by 24, I believe,
Yeah.
roller. So a lot of our quilters will use this, but we will be using this probably with a future project. When we
Absolutely.
plan on doing that jacket, which is the quilted one. You do have to mark the quilting lines. So a little down the road when we show that, you'll want one of these rollers. And I say you want the pink one, not the yellow one.
I would get the pink one.
So everything's better in pink.
I
Pink
agree.
measuring tape, pink roller.
Yeah.
Can't beat that.
That's pink scissors. We could get some pink. We have purple scissors, but close enough.
Matches. It's Easter themed,
Yeah.
you know, spring,
Pastels.
pastels.
I like it.
So what we have next here is I did see somebody mention about pinking shears. So you can use pinking shears on your seams, and we didn't show that, but you can. It will not fray as much. It's just over time, I know it does, but it does work if you are a beginner and you don't have a serger. You don't want to take too much time doing stitch number 28 out on the machine because it does take a lot longer doing it on the machine itself rather than a serger. But definitely get a pair of pinking shears too. It does make it a little easier, even with trimming that facing. We could have did that.
That would be
and
a great use for it.
I probably should have showed that. So
That's okay. Okay, and then our regular scissors as well to go with it.
yes, these Kai 8-inch dressmaking shears. I really like these actually. These are super nice too, because we like to use both rotary cutters and scissors when we're cutting out. I like to use the rotary cutter for the curved parts,
Mhm.
but that's just, I find it a little easier. But
Right.
for straight cuts, I like to use regular
Yeah.
scissors.
Me too.
And then up next, once again, we have this Gypsy Quilter Tailor's Clapper. Just get this. You want this. So I use the most out of every tool, I think, when pressing, and it does give a nice press to every seam, and it makes your clothes look a lot more professional. And we're here to teach you how to make clothes that are going to look beautiful, that you're going to go out and wear in public, and you get to say, I made it. So
Yes.
I mean, look at Genevieve's dress. You get to tell everybody you made
I
this.
do, and everyone has such great reactions too. It's such a fun little rewarding part of sewing your own clothes. But
No, it's the funnest thing.
Yeah.
Next up, once again, the mini ironing board. This is called a sleeve board. So you can use this when you're ironing your sleeve. So not for just sewing, but
Yeah.
when you're ironing your clothes, if you're like me, definitely get one of these. So, because we will be using these a lot with our upcoming projects, especially when we're pressing open seams of sleeves. So,
Yes. Okay. What is next?
and then
Ooh.
we got two things. So our Panasonic irons, we have two colors. We have gold, and then we have, is it ruby?
Yep.
So I like the ruby one better. I didn't have it next to me. I couldn't find it. So I have the gold one. But I love these. They stay on for 2 hours. It gives you a nice amount of steam, and it's cordless. So, and it's lightweight. It's not real heavy. So definitely one of our favorite irons. We love these here at Gloria's. So. But-
And to go with it, we have this magic iron cleaner, which we used this in the kit room the other day because Carol found an iron and she cleaned it up right away and it's working perfectly now.
Yes.
So this stuff is really, really great to have around.
Yeah, and you definitely need this because when you are sewing clothes, the last thing you want is gunk from your iron
Yeah.
getting on your clothes. Oh my gosh, that'd be terrible. I did that once, and I had to
Yeah.
recut part of it. I couldn't get the
That's
stain
the
out.
worst.
So keep your irons clean. Super important.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
then I think we have a couple presser feet we're
Yeah,
going to show
we
real
do.
quick.
Okay. Put some
So
of these out here.
the first one
Just put
first,
them all.
we're going to show that again. We were using this one today, and I definitely recommend this. Is that 5/8 inch seam allowance foot, and you can make it go down to a 1/4, but definitely get that
Take
foot,
this off here so you
especially
can see
for
it a
when you're
little
sewing
better.
these patterns, because sometimes even with like the other machines, I question, I'm like, wait, where's that 5/8 inch seam allowance again when I'm looking at the plate? And
Yeah.
I think having that
It gets
guide.
lost very easily, yeah. Even just sewing today, I'm like in love with this little guy. So definitely grab one of those for yourself. Okay. What else
So-
do we have here?
What we have here is, let's do my favorite foot, the N Plus monogramming foot. So I tell everybody this is my favorite foot, and the reason why is because it has these brackets. So when you're doing decorative stitches, it holds in place. And so the regular N foot can wobble a lot. Using this one makes it so it doesn't wobble, and you could totally add decorative stitching to this dress
Oh,
along
absolutely.
its sleeves. There's some really pretty ones in other machines with like snowflakes or other things with this S, and I'm just thinking like you could add a couple rows of
Oh my
decorative
God, yeah.
stitching around a couple of these
Anywhere.
pieces and like just do multiple rows. That would be so pretty, especially
Yes.
doing it maybe like in a gold embroidery
Yeah, a little
thread.
sparkly.
That would
Oh,
be really pretty.
wow.
So definitely get one of these. We didn't have too much time to show decorative stitching on this, but maybe I'll show one in the future where we're going to add a couple rows. Zipper foot. We will be using this in an upcoming project when we go ahead and show that edge-to-edge quilted vest that we're going to do with the one pattern. Because we will be putting a zipper in on that. So you'll want to make sure that you have one of these handy. I like this narrow zipper foot a lot better than the regular zipper foot that you get in the machines. It's a little easier to use in my opinion. So
Yes. What?
now
Our hemmer foot.
our hemmer feet. So if you wanted to with this dress, you totally could do a narrow rolled hem. It does take a little bit of a hang to get the hold of using one of these feet. So I definitely recommend practicing with a scrap piece of fabric. The way that it works is you feed it through, and then it will make a narrow rolled hem as you're sewing. So, and we have two sizes. The one is 4 millimeters. The other one is 6 millimeters. So it just has a little bit of a difference in size. I think one is a little bit closer to about a 1/16 of an inch, not that small, and the other one's a little bit closer to an 1/8. So it doesn't hurt to pick up one of these. I'd love to use one of these in the future if we do a project with a chiffon or organza. That's where I really like to use these feet because it makes using those materials a lot easier for those little baby hems. So we'll be showing that probably much later down the line when we get to working with those tricky fabrics, but I'll definitely be showing that at some point.
And I did use it on this dress, and it works what?
Oh, you did use it on this dress.
I
I
did
did
use
not
it with
know
this
that.
dress. I did.
So
yeah,
it's a great foot to use. So, alrighty, and then
last but not least, we have our blind stitch foot, which also comes with a guide. I love all these guides they have now. Here's our blind stitch foot.
and I know the way that you use that foot. So let's say this is the raw edge of your fabric, which you would want to serge. You'll fold it like that, and then you have it go up this way. And it's going to stitch mainly on this side here, and it will do one little zigzag every now and then to catch this. And when you fold it over, if you use invisible thread, you won't see it, or using a close enough matching color thread. So those blind hem feet can be really nice if you don't want to have a visible hem on this dress. And then,
here's our box for that.
you know, I did want to throw this in there real quick. I think with this dress, if you have an applaud, I'd love to see if you make this dress and you top stitch the seams and use the wiper stitch. I just happen to have Dazzle Silver right here. I think that would have looked beautiful maybe with one of these dresses. I know Genevieve top stitched her seams on each side, so doesn't hurt to stock up on it. And once again, 10% back on everything we're showing today. So, except the only exclusion is the spring event. Definitely make sure you sign up. If you have more questions, give us a call to the main store number. We'll be more than happy to answer them. And then I think we have 2 items left, right?
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and show these. We do have both types of pins that we were using, but I also saw these. And similar to the magic pins, they have those nice rubber grips, but these ones are heat resistant, so you can actually iron with them. So that's pretty cool. And then
These are the ones.
here are the ones that we used. Both are really nice to use. I really like the magic ones because they're super thin profile, super easy to sew with. So and then we have, oh, these are super cute.
I'm so glad these made it in the lineup. These cute little patches.
So these are iron-on patches. I want to tell you now. So for spring event, if you're attending, I kind of gave a teaser for Tommy and I's room last night, but you might want to get a couple of these because you could add them to that jacket that you're going to get. So I think that would be really fun. And look how cute these are.
I love these. I've had my eye on these for a little bit, and I'm so glad we have them today.
Blood, sweat, and shears. I love that. That is so true. I have
Yes.
pricked myself with pins too many times, so I have put my blood, sweat, and tears into sewing clothes. And then never give up with the seam ripper. I think that's
I
super
love that.
cute.
I have a pin that would go wonderfully with that.
And then we have a sewing machine too. So those are really fun patches that you could just iron on to a denim jacket or something. That'd be really fun. And then last but not least is, and we are going to go brief over those patterns one more time. Last but not least, squeezy snips. I love using these, especially if you have a machine that doesn't have the automatic thread cutting. I recommend getting a pair of these. Super nice. I'm going to grab something real quick. We did get those patterns in today. I'm not going to run over to the other building, but I'm just going to brief over the ones that we just got in shipment. I just have the pictures printed in the other room. I will be right
So
back.
excited. And I can show ours that we used here again today. This is our pattern. Simplicity S9615. It comes in sizes extra small through extra large, and that all of those sizes are included in the pattern. On the back, we have our measurements, our guides, and I don't think we showed this later. All of our fabric guides are right here, so you would go down from this top column. Extra small is going to be all the way down here, and it also includes the finished garment measurements. And this is on almost all of the Simplicity patterns, as far as I know. And you also get your instruction booklet in there. So that's the one we did today.
And super fun. We have some other ideas that we're having planning coming up. So we are on every other Friday. The patterns that we did just get in our shipment. So I'm going to go over these, and we do remember 10% back today. Take advantage of that. Get the patterns now. Kits now even.
Yeah.
Because we do have those kits. Maybe we'll just kind of, if you want to go watch the replay, we have those in the lineup. But it's first pattern that I have. So if anybody from Bag Lady Club is here, Tiffany, she might show these one day, or we might join on one of us with her to sew one of these cute bag patterns. I really like this one. That's super cute, super fun. So, and then up next, we do have this easy crew neck. I love Norris Dontaford and Mimi G. They are a couple. They design patterns together, and they work with Simplicity. Tons of great sewing videos online that you can kind of learn from them. They do sew-alongs, kind of like what we're doing here. But we definitely want to do a crew neck when we get a little bit closer to fall. It's an easy serger project, super fun, and we'll probably show how you could decorate it. So we'll probably do this pattern a little closer to fall, but if you guys go ahead of us a little bit, that would be fun. And here's that vest I was talking about that you're going to want to get that narrow zipper foot for. It's going to be a really fun make, and we're going to do edge to edge with either maybe a Radiance or Avenir or Solaris to kind of show that as a feature. But we're going to show a couple other ways that you could quilt this to if you don't have a machine like that. So, and last but not least actually is this beautiful quilted jacket. I can't wait till we show this one. It'll be super fun. Definitely get this one. I can't wait to make that. I promised
so
Joni
exciting.
last night that we will make the one that we're going to show for her, and she could put that on. So
good.
Joni's
I
going to
didn't
get
know
that
that.
one
I
when we
love
make
that.
this. So,
Yeah.
but that is all for us today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are so appreciative. So I hope that you had a fun Fashion Friday.
Yes.
And Genevieve, you got to
I'll
give
do
one
more
spin of the
time.
dress.
I'll give a spin. It's so twirly. Yeah.
So,
Thank you guys for joining.
yep. Thank you guys so much for joining. We had a wonderful time. I hope that you guys did too. So,
Yeah.
3 o'clock IQ design.
3
yes.
o'clock IQ Designer. And I was forgetting one thing. We are supposed to give out a $25 gift card prize. I almost forgot
goodness.
that. So somebody comment the color Genevieve is thinking about right now. So whichever color you're thinking
All right, I
about,
have
when
one.
you see
I'm
somebody
ready.
comment it, that's who's going to win. So
Give us a color before you go.
so we do have a little bit of a 30-second delay. So sorry about that. I
That's
almost
okay.
forgot that
Oh,
one.
I see it. It was purple, which I think I saw someone commented. Where was it? Jean Pang.
Jean Pang, congratulations. So you will get a
Yay.
$25 gift card added to your comments sold account. So once again, thank you everyone. Sorry we almost
Thank
forgot that last
you.
part, but I hope
So
that you had
many
a great
blue
time.
lovers.
So
Thank you so much.
alrighty, well have a great day
Yeah.
everyone.
Bye.